So, students, here I am with this new chapter called Indigo. You know, we have this Louis Fisher, who is the writer, and Mahatma Gandhi, his first political movement in India in actually 1917. So, we will go about reading it. Picture this. After his triumph at Champaran Revolution, when Gandhi is to return back, Charles Free Andrews, an English pacifist and a devout follower of Gandhi, wanted to stay in Champaran. Now, this is about an Englishman, a white man, who wanted, at the end of this Champaran movement, actually, when he came up and says, Gandhiji, can I stay over here? And I want to help these peasants, these farmers, these poor farmers. I want to embolden them, give them strength, and uh, help them fight against the British. But but Gandhi objected to it. Although Gandhi's lawyer friends always thought that it was a good idea with a white man on their side, but Gandhiji absolutely rejected it, and he had a very genuine reason behind it. Let's see why. Why does he do it? Why does Gandhi say go to Chile, another country, not in India? Because we have had your support so far. Now let the peasants fight their own battle. This is exactly why Gandhiji refused this idea of Charles Freeman. Remember Charles Freeman? Why he wanted to stay in India? The simple reason, he thought peasants would be all alone. They will be left without any support of the any of the white people, and they would be actually getting courage from me being white, as Freeman said. But Gandhi said no. He says this would show the weakness of their hearts. That means they have not yet gathered the courage to fight. Let them fight their own battle without any support. So Gandhiji's first concern was to be self-reliant. Very importantly, freedom from the fear of the British, not just freedom from British. Even if I help them, even if you help them, Mr. Charles, even if you help any power in the world may help them, but if they can't fight alone of their own strength, of their own steam, then it's futile, it's useless. So freedom from fear is the most important thing. If British is the question, then British go and somebody else would come, and that fear would be transferred. But no, freedom from fear is the most important thing. That was Gandhiji's main concern. Second concern was hygiene and sanitation, plus the medical facilities. Now, how did the Champaran movement start? Now, here the story starts. I have made a detailed animated video as well of it, and I would want all of you to see and watch and learn from it. The chapter tells you that there was a poor peasant who actually was a leader of the peasants. He was a money lender. He used to lend money to little poor peasants, but now that he himself went short of money, that is where Rajkumar Shukla came to Gandhiji's Sabarmati ashram. He wanted Gandhi to accompany him to Champaran, which is a small village in Bihar. Now, Shukla, how did he look like? He was a very poor peasant. He was illiterate, but he was very resolute. Resolute means strong in will. He had a strong willpower. He looked very determined to take Gandhiji along with him. But Gandhi was a busy man. He had other um, appointments. He had to go to Ahmedabad and then to Lucknow. So many conferences, conventions to attend. But Shukla was very articulate, very clear in his grievances. He had said, "We are being exploited by the British planters and Indian landlords." Indian landlords also had, in fact, not just the landlords, but the lawyers also, you will come to know a little later. They also went under the British planters. They had big farmlands, and there was something more which he was just about to say. Of course, yeah, very importantly, Gandhiji had a very good record in Africa. He had just returned from Africa. That was in 1915. He returned to India, But 1916, he had a very important convention, Indian National Congress, INC. You could see Lucknow, very important convention in December 2016 to attend. So he could not go with Shukla. But he went to Kolkata to bring Gandhi to Champaran. En route to Champaran on 12th April 1917. That was the day next year, that is about 6 months after Shukla had come to invite Gandhi. It was in April. Gandhi said, I cannot come now. I have this convention, that convention. It must have been long back when he came, probably in October. But November, December, January, February, March, April. So 12th of April was the day. In the next year, that is 1917, when from Kolkata, the present Kolkata, and that day's Calcutta, from Calcutta he boarded a train to Patna in Bihar. Gandhi had a very good friend in Rajendra Prasad. Rajendra Prasad was a well-known lawyer, and Gandhi also knew about the curse of untouchability. So then he moved to Muzaffarpur with uh, Muzaffarpur. I stayed at a very good friend of his, that is Professor J.B. Kriplani. Professor J.B. Kriplani was, as the prefix suggests, he was a professor in a government college over there. On 12th of April 1917, he stayed there, Muzaffarpur. Gandhi, when he went there, he met many lawyers. He chided them. Chided means simple. Chided means scolded them in a very childish way. I mean, he treated them friendly, but he scolded them. He said, why are you taking a lot of fee from the peasants, your own countrymen? The peasants, the poor farmers, are your own countrymen, and the lawyers also were Indians. They were from Muzaffarpur when Gandhi wanted to meet them, because uh, the last nail in the coffin. Actually, the lawyers would not even support their own countrymen. So where would the farmers go to fight their case? So they got scolded. Now, what was the issue? There was this thin katia system, as I marked at the bottom right in green and blue. Thin katia system actually was, that is where the exploitation started. According to this system, it was a very exploitative system, a very draconian, a very cruel system, under which the peasants were required to plant indigo in 15% of the whole of the land holdings. Now, what are these land holdings? Land holdings were actually big lands owned by the British planters, and Indian zamindars were deputed to take care of them, and they were actually asked to collect money from the peasants. Money in the form of this indigo cash crop. 15%, what does this mean? 15%, if you divide 3 by 20, it will come out to be 15%. So 1 bigha actually had 20 kathas. If you divide 1 bigha of land, then you would see they were divided into 20 kathas. Out of these 20 parts, 3 parts out of those 20 would be devoted exclusively for indigo plantation, which was actually a very devastating, very cruel thing, because those 3 parts would absolutely become barren in some time, in some due course of time. And that 3 parts land would go barren. Again, the next 3 parts, again next 3 parts would be having indigo plantation. But after a due course of time, again that next 3 parts would go barren. Barren means infertile, and in that way the whole of the land would go infertile. But that was a very cruel system. Why was they forced to plant indigo? But somehow, luckily, fortunately enough for the peasants, as they thought it to be fortunate, they thought it was good for them that suddenly there was a sort of revolution in Germany, which used to be a very developed country in those times. But there was this synthetic indigo which was invented over there. Now you would wonder what synthetic means. Synthetic means man-made. So in factories, indigo, that is neel ki kheti, in factories it was manufactured. So natural plantation was not needed. Do you understand? So now there would be no need for any indigo plantation, which came to be a good news for the peasants. So they were very happy, but their happiness did not last long, because another brutal agreement came forth. Brutal means very very cruel agreement came forth. Now the sharecroppers, that is the peasants, were to be freed from that contract, 15% land contract or 15% land agreement, on one condition. The zamindars asked, that is the British planters, actually asked them to pay a thick lump sum amount as a compensation to be freed from that 15% land agreement. Now, one thing here I need to really tell you, it is in context of this whole picture. Now, what if the farmer would not be able to plant 15% indigo? Then he would have to have he had to pay a certain amount. So, be it indigo crop or 15%, a certain amount of indigo, or a certain sure amount of money to be paid. But that was a very barbaric, sharp, brutal contract in which the farmer or the peasants, poor peasants, were bound in. Now another agreement had come. Now you want to be free? Okay, let's have a certain amount. You pay a whole lump sum amount and you'll be freed from this 15% land agreement. Now this also was so brutal, so unbearable, intolerable, that it was too much for them to bear. So Rajkumar Shukla came to Gandhiji actually at this very point. Now you can well imagine the sharecroppers or the peasants, whenever they objected, they revolted, they were beaten mercilessly by the landlords, right? And much less the landlords, even the lawyers were not with them. Indian lawyers did not ever support them. They took very high fee. They were actually baking their own chapatis, you know, grinding their own axe in a certain way. The lawyers also wanted to earn money from poor peasants. So nobody with them, with nobody with them, peasants were left marooned, abandoned, very, very alone, and they were on the verge of suicide. So at this very point, Gandhiji arrived in Champaran. It was a ray of hope for the peasants, and that was 15th April 1917. Now, you would come across a certain sequence of happenings wherein Gandhiji gets opposition, gets opposed by some British officials. First, he met opposition from British Landlords Association. Actually, Gandhi himself went and met him, but what happened, we will go to the next slide. But these are the four segments of officials who objected to his arrival in Champaran. They never wanted Gandhi to come over here. British Landlords Association, British Official Commissioner, Police, SP, and Magistrate at the Motihari Court, which is the capital of Champaran. Remember these 4 points. These 4 officials. Now we'll go one by one. Secretary of British Landlords Association. Actually, Gandhi went to meet him. He wanted to know the details as to what was happening. Show me the papers, Gandhi said. Show me the papers of agreement. Show me the contract. But he outright refused. He said, Gandhi, you are an outsider. He refused to give any information to him. So Gandhi said, hello, Mr. Landlords Association Secretary. I am not the one who is outsider. You are the one. Moreover, I am free to travel in my own country wherever I want. So I am not an outsider. British Official Commissioner next of Tirhut Division, that is in Champaran district. He bullied Gandhi. He said, actually he advised, but he was actually threatening Gandhi to leave Tirhut, which was not actually entertained by Gandhiji. Gandhi said, I will not leave Tirhut. This is my own country. Whether it's Ahmedabad or it's Lucknow or it's Bihar, it's my country. You had better leave. Now police SP. Superintendent of Police. Now that is a very interesting sequence wherein Gandhi, I showed it in the video as well in my lesson, where Gandhi actually, while he was staying at Muzaffarpur, he got to listen to a news about one peasant getting beaten mercilessly in an adjoining village. So Shukla ji, Rajkumar Shukla took Gandhi to that very place where that ugly incident had happened, and they went on elephants. But the police superintendent sent a messenger to arrest Gandhi. Gandhi said, I disobey. I refuse to obey. He immediately said, I am not at all threatened by you, and I will meet you in court tomorrow. So the next day, that is the 18th of April 1917, remember this date, was the appearance, the trial of actually, the trial of Gandhi in the court. That is Motihari. Remember this place, Motihari, which is actually the capital of Champaran, where he was tried in court. He was in dock before the judge. Now, Gandhi knew that would happen. Gandhi was a well prepared man. He did 3 to 4 things actually. The whole night he kept awake and he did research on all the concrete proofs. He did everything that he could. He had influential friends in Rajendra Prasad and others. Like I said, he stayed at Professor Kriplani's house, and he had very good friends over there who actually helped him. Now, overnight, what he did, he actually, before he went to court next day, I shall show it on the next slide. Okay, actually, he wired to the viceroy of the British viceroy. He sent a telegram to the British viceroy about the next day's hearing in his court. Actually, his trial in the court, rather. So he foresaw the events before they could happen. He foresaw means he could tell before something happened. Yeah, tomorrow they could arrest me and put me into jail. So let me telegram a wire. Let me send a telegram to the Viceroy of Britain, British Viceroy, about what was to happen. So the press media gathered outside the next day outside the court, and it was an absolutely shocking thing for the magistrate as well as the lawyers over there. They wanted to arrest him, but they were flummoxed. Absolutely, they could not know what to do because the media was there outside, the press media, so they could not arrest him. And Gandhi was a very, like I said, very analytical person. He stayed at a house in Motihari, used it as a headquarters. This is interesting. He stayed at a house in Motihari, where he was later tried, and he took investigatory notes, evidences from his lawyer friends who actually were scolded in the very beginning, but later they went on to help him. And they had promised also to Gandhiji, Gandhiji, in case you are arrested, we will also quote our arrests. Now, the depositions by 10,000 peasants were also written down. The complaints of 10,000 peasants and what actually had gone wrong with him, which documents were looted from them, which money was taken away from them. Now, all those depositions was taken in written from the peasants. Okay. Now, this is something which I discussed. Some friends, Birj Kishore Babu, Maulana Mazharul Haq, and Rajendra Prasad, and many others, they were good friends. He took help of everybody. Well, the next morning, like I said, in the trial at the trial in the court, Motihari district, a great multitude of peasants gathered outside the court. It was a spontaneous demonstration by them in thousands, and the officials felt powerless for the first time. For the first time, they felt the power of the peasants and the Indians, and Gandhi was at the hem of affairs, with him at the hem, at the center, as a source of their courage. The poor peasants, the poor Indian farmers really had gathered courage to stand outside to crowd outside the court, so much so that nobody had the courage to arrest Gandhi. Of course, press also had gathered, and they did not want their leader, their beloved leader, to get arrested. Gandhiji pacified the crowd. They said, "No, don't break the law," as it is written over here. They asked for Gandhiji's help to control the crowd. Who is they? The British officials asked Gandhiji, "Please control the crowd." And he went out and said, "Calm down. I'll not be arrested. I'm there with you." Gandhiji was not a lawbreaker, as he very well said in the court before the judge. He says, "I will not obey you just because I am obeying my inner voice, the voice of my conscience." So that doesn't mean lawlessness. That means he was respectful to the authorities, but a higher law of his own being also exists, and that is something that he has to obey first. So the lawyers were ashamed and they were ready to follow. Like I already told you, this one I told, Viceroy was already informed by telegram by Gandhiji before, in the night before. So he was let free without bail. Now, that was a triumph of a first civil disobedience movement in India. Which year? 1917. Lieutenant Governor of the province ordered the case against Gandhi to be dropped. The Lieutenant Governor or Lieutenant Governor, whichever way you pronounce it, of the province ordered the case against Gandhi to be dropped. Now, Lieutenant Governor summoned Gandhi again May, June, 2 months, almost 2 months later. A commission was to sit, right? He was summoned again in June 1917. Gandhi knew that he could be arrested. Again, he met some lawyers, laid plans in written. If that happens, then this you would do this. If this course of action, the course of events, the events took this turn, then you would take that action. That way, he planned everything. And an official commission of inquiry was appointed. What to do with this 15% land agreement? Because it was a movement which was gathering momentum, gathering force, gathering strength. So a commission was set up which had some landlords, very cunning landlords, and British government officials, and Gandhiji to represent the peasants. Gandhi was the only representative of the peasants. Right. 7 months of stay in Champaran in all. And finally, the planters agreed to make refunds to the peasants. British planters were found guilty in the findings of the commission, which I just talked about. And mountain of evidence was found against the landlords. The planters agreed to refund a part of the money. Now, how much is it that they agreed to refund? Gandhiji actually initially demanded 50% of the extorted money back. 50%. He bargained. He said 50% of the money extorted, but planters agreed to refund up to just 25%. But anyways, Gandhiji agreed to it. Okay, refund 25%, because according to Gandhiji, now there's a question that would come in the examination. Why would Gandhi agree on just 25%? Because that was the first symbol of a win against the mighty British Empire. The British had to buckle down on their knees, come down on it. The mighty British came down on their knees before the humble peasants for the first time in that regime. So it was a symbol, and more was to follow. That was the first triumph in the political career of Gandhi, and that actually was the first political fight in Gandhiji's career in India. So the peasants learned what? Something very important: courage. And within a few years, the indigo sharecropping disappeared. That was a turning point in Gandhi's career. After all that happened, after their big triumph, Gandhiji's passion for sanitation continued. He uh, incorporated and encouraged cleanliness and hygiene in the whole village, whole district of Champaran. Mahadev Desai, a government teacher, and Narhari Parikh, also a teacher, helped him They cleaned their own laboratories. Gandhiji's medical measures also 6 months. For 6 months, government doctor was deputed over there. He was a volunteer. Doctor himself said, "I would stay over here for 6 months." And some important medicines in those times, they were big ones. What are these? Castor oil, sulfur, and quinine. So castor oil, sulfur, and quinine, they were prescribed over there to keep sanity and hygiene. So the teachings were British are nobody to order me about in my own country. Charles, Free, and Andrews, whom I had initially talked. In the very beginning, I talked about Charles Andrews, who was an English pacifist. For this very reason, was asked to move out of country on another mission of his, but not to help the Indians, because Indians are to help themselves. Lesson of fearlessness, self-reliance. The first civil disobedience movement, a watershed moment, a turning point in Gandhi's political career. Thank you.